Board members, it is truly my pleasure to introduce, actually Carolyn Evans is going to start, but she's going to bring up some distinguished guests that I have known literally all of my life. And, people in the community say, I've known you a long time. Literally, from the day I was born, I've known these people. So it is what an honor to ask them to come forward. Mrs. Evans.
Good evening, Mrs. Evans.
Good evening. Good evening, Superintendent Neal, President Lanier, and members of the board. It is such an extreme honor to have the opportunity to introduce our distinguished guest. But before I do so, I would like to share a little bit of history so that you will have context for this great celebration. From the very beginning, from the inception of the United States Marine Corps, they refused to recruit or enlist African Americans, American Indians, Hispanics, or other minorities. During World War I, the racism in our country was so strong that one Marine Corps leader stated that if I had to choose between 500 white fighters or 250,000 soldiers in an integrated unit, I would rather die with the 500 white. In 1942, however, despite violent opposition, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Bill 8802, which led to the creation of the Fair Employment Practices Committee, and they forced the Marine Corps to begin recruiting African Americans in that same year. The first Black recruits received their basic training in a segregated facility known as Montford Point Base in North Carolina, and they continued to do so until 1949. Approximately 20,000 young African American men received their basic training there. Conditions at the camp, as well as in our country, were inferior for these men. But over and over, they did what they set out to do. They proved themselves as men. They proved themselves as patriots. And they proved themselves as brave and great men of valor. President Obama, in June, in a ceremony held in Washington to award the 18,000 the Congressional Gold Medal, said, despite being denied many basic rights, the Montford Point Marines committed to serve our country with selfless patriotism. Senator Debbie Stabenow stated, it is wonderful that we pay tribute to the legacies of these courageous Marines. The Montford Point Marines proudly served our nation despite the bitter racial strife of segregated training facilities. And finally, Senator Carl Levin, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, added these remarks. Thank you for your love of the country that was so strong that it overcame the double standards that you faced. Thank you for paving the way for a more perfect nation. Superintendent Neal, President Lanier, and members of the board, cabinet, and members of this great community. At this time, I would like to recognize 4 recipients of the Congressional Gold Medal. And I'm going to ask that if they are able, if they would stand as I call their names. First is Corporal Reuben Smart. A teacher, an educational leader and principal in Grand Rapids Public Schools, a great man of God and a humanitarian. Next is Sergeant Robert Bobby Jones. Sergeant Jones is recipient of the 1986 Martha Reynolds Labor Award, Giants Award, and he is a giant of giants in his own right. He is also a graduate of Creston High School. Here for Sergeant Fred Johnson, who is now deceased, is his son, Fred Johnson Jr. But I was unable to get his history earlier.
That's okay.
But I will make sure that the board, I will submit this to our superintendent, and we will have that. But thank you on our behalf anyway. And then last but not least, and standing in for this gentleman also is Private First Class David King. And standing in for him is his niece, Debbie Jones.
Absolutely.
Mr. King distinguished himself as being the first African American to be a part of the Grand Rapids Fire Department. He often shared the story that on his very first day, he met bitter racism and was asked repeatedly to quit, but he didn't. He served 33 years with the Grand Rapids Fire Department. I'm going to ask these gentlemen to come forward, and if they would like to speak for a moment, and when they are done, I'm going to ask this audience if they would not stand with an expression of appreciation and give them the applause that they deserve.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans.
Would you like to say anything, Mr. Smart?
I want to say thank you.
Okay, they don't want to speak tonight.
You are so welcome.
No, I'll just say thank you also.
Okay, so let's stand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans, for that tribute. I'll open up the floor for questions and comments from the board, but I'll just say these brief remarks. Quite frequently, we make comments about whose shoulders we stand on. And I am just filled with emotion right now because those are shoulders. Thank you for bringing them here tonight. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? None?
There's a lot I could say about a couple of those individuals over there, but thank you guys. Appreciate the work that you've done in the past. As President Lanier said, we stand on your shoulders, and we're honored to do so. And I was shocked. Mr. Smart, he talked so much in school, when we were in school. He didn't have anything to say. He used to say a lot to us, didn't he, Superintendent Neal?
Absolutely.
Well, he was a quiet storm. He did it with the paddle. Appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work.
Ms. Slade?
I do want to add also,
These guys are modest, and that's the way they all are. I went down to D.C. All those guys, they were just like this.
Yes.
We have to understand, when I got my dad's medal, a gentleman who happened to be African-American, a 3-star general, United States Marine Corps, the highest-ranking Marine in the Marine Corps, put my dad's ribbon around my neck. He says, without your father, people like your father, I wouldn't be here today.
Absolutely.
These guys changed the world.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And they're all just that modest. They didn't do it for credit. They did it so guys like that general could be where he is today, and they changed
That's
the world.
right.
I just so appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr.
yes, I certainly can't top that with beautiful words, but I remember Reuben Smart when he was a principal at South Middle. That was a little while ago.
A couple years ago.
He did this district a great honor by being an excellent principal, and I was pleased to work with you.
And if I can just say, Deborah Jones is filling in for her uncle, but she's sitting next to her father.
That's right.
And I think that needs to be mentioned as well. They look just alike, but besides that.
Can I say something?
You can, Debbie.
And just, to really piggyback on what Freddie said also is that these 4 men were intertwined in so many lives.
That's right.
In this community. And it's just amazing when the ceremony was being put on, when it was planned, and I said to the Justice Department, this place is going to be packed because you all don't understand that all 4 of these men have made an impact on so many people, from young to old. So they are still continuing, yes, that what they stood for back in the early 40s, and we do appreciate of them.
Absolutely. I would just like to thank Mr. Lumpkins for bringing Mr. Smart, and for Stevie. I asked him if he still goes by Stevie. But for Stevie Jones, right, because I've known him all my life, and for Debbie's daughter for coming. I would like to thank you, too, for sharing with us this evening. Thank you.
Steph Kabasi.